Usually, when we think about a life just totally changing forever, we imagine this loud, dramatic explosion,
Right, like a massive event everyone sees coming.
Exactly. But sometimes the entire foundation of a life just crumbles in the dead of night, literally in a whisper.
Yeah, it's those quiet moments that are actually the most destructive.
So picture this scene from our source text today. It is 2:05 a.m. on a really warm July night in 2020.
Okay, setting the scene.
A woman is jolted out of a dead sleep. She opens her eyes to the dark room, and she hears her husband of 26 years lying right next to her.
In their own bed.
And he's voice texting someone else. He whispers 5 words that were never, ever meant for her ears.
Oh, wow.
He says, "I just can't quit you."
I mean, that single quiet moment right there, that is the definitive end of a life she had spent almost 3 decades painstakingly building.
It really is.
It just draws this terrifying line in the sand, between the life she thought she had and the reality she's about to face.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are unpacking Jen Hatmaker's highly personal memoir, Awake.
Yes, this is a heavy one, but so fascinating.
Really fascinating. As we go through these pages today, we're going to explore the complete anatomy of a life unraveling.
And we'll be looking at the incredibly restrictive cultural systems that built that life in the first place.
Right, and then we'll follow her profound, honestly really messy journey of rebuilding her identity completely from the studs up.
It's a total teardown and rebuild.
It is. Now, before we really get into it, I need to add a quick caveat for you listening. As we map out this unraveling, we are going to hit some intense cultural lightning rods.
We definitely are.
Yeah. The author's story is deeply intertwined with things like conservative evangelicalism, systemic racism, the 2016 election, LGBTQ plus affirmation, all of it.
So we want to be super clear up front. Our job as your guides today isn't to take a stance on these massive cultural debates.
Right, not at all.
We are not endorsing any specific political or religious viewpoints here. Our goal is strictly to step inside the author's shoes and objectively report on how these forces collided in her lived experience.
Exactly. We just want to convey the ideas exactly as they are presented in the source material. We're looking at the psychological architecture of her journey.
Right, because what's fascinating here is how a person's internal world responds when the external structures they've trusted their whole life just suddenly collapse.
So let's jump right back to that devastating fallout. It's 2:30 a.m. After those 5 whispered words, the author basically spends the next 4 hours in pure adrenaline-fueled chaos.
I can't even imagine the panic.
Right. She's following a trail of betrayal on his computer in the dark, and then by 6:30 a.m., the sun is up. She wakes him up, demands the truth, gets stonewalled, and kicks him out.
Just like that. Within 4 hours,
he never spends another night in that house.
The speed of that transition is staggering.
It is. And what she realizes in this immediate scorched earth aftermath is just how much of her life was actually tucked away in what she calls hidden corners.
Yeah, and the concept of the hidden corner is totally central to understanding this entire memoir.
How does she define it again?
So she defines these corners as the psychological spaces where we intentionally tuck away unwanted, painful truths.
Like things we just don't want to deal with.
Exactly. It might be a dead bedroom, or maybe an unacknowledged addiction.
Or a failing marriage.
Right. Or just a profound, gnawing unhappiness that you can't explain. We compartmentalize these realities and lock them away so we can continue living the story of our lives.
The story rather than the actual reality.
Exactly. We prioritize the narrative over our actual lives.
Okay, wait a minute, though. I have to push back here a little bit.
Sure. Go for it.
Is ignoring the truth always a malicious act of deception? Like, when I read this, I kept thinking that this wasn't just her maliciously lying to everyone around her.
You mean she was lying to herself?
Yeah. She was desperately lying to herself. It feels way less like calculated deception and more like a desperate survival mechanism, just to keep from losing the only life she knew.
No, I think that's a really good point. The psychology of avoiding the whole truth rarely stems from malicious deception.
Right.
Most people don't hide the truth because they're just unrepentant liars. They hide it because the whole truth is a wrecking ball.
Yeah, it destroys everything.
Facing it creates a definitive before and after. And the before, even if it is completely miserable, suffocating, and deeply lonely, well, it's at least familiar terrain.
You know the rules of your misery.
Exactly. You know how to operate there. But the after is an absolute void. It means disrupting the image you've nurtured, the career you enjoy, the community approval you rely on.
So people use hidden corners because stepping into the void of the after is just terrifying.
Exactly. You desperately want the story of your marriage, not the actual marriage, because the story feels safe.
That makes so much sense. But the text forces us to ask, why was she so desperate to maintain that specific illusion of a perfect marriage?
Right. Where does that pressure come from?
Yeah. And to understand the sheer weight of that pressure, the book takes us back to the blueprints of her worldview, which was forged in 1990s conservative Baptist culture.
We really have to look at the rigid architecture of the bubble she grew up in to understand this. In that world, failure wasn't just an option, it was an existential threat to her identity.
Yeah, and the text provides this incredibly visceral anecdote about a true love waits seminar. She attended this as a high school freshman.
Oh, the rose object lesson?
Yes. So the youth pastor stands in front of the room holding this beautiful blooming red rose, and he tells the girls, "This is you. This is presenting yourself pure to your husband on your wedding night."
And then he starts describing normal teenage behavior.
Exactly, just normal stuff, kissing, touching, exploring, and with every example, he violently plucks a petal off the rose.
Ugh, and drops it on the floor.
Drops it right on the stained church carpet. Until finally, he holds up this barren, ruined stick and basically tells them, this is what you'll offer your husband if you mess up.
That is just brutal.
The author describes sitting in that metal folding chair, burning with shame over a harmless middle school kiss, wondering if she was already permanently ruined.
What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanism behind object lessons like that. It is purely fear-based institutional control.
Right?
When you teach young girls that their inherent worth is as fragile as a flower petal, and that a single misstep permanently destroys their value, you ensure compliance.
You completely terrify them into following the rules.
Exactly. But the fallout of that rigged system doesn't just hurt the women.
No, it doesn't.
The text contrasts this Rose anecdote with her own son's experience years later at a youth camp.
Oh man, this part was hard to read.
It was. These middle school boys were taken out to a campfire at night and publicly interrogated by leaders about watching porn.
Which is wild.
Right, and if they denied it, they were called liars and threatened with being sent away.
Her son didn't even know what the word meant yet, but he ended up staying by the fire just out of sheer embarrassment.
He absorbed the message that he was inherently dirty and deviant before he even really understood human sexuality.
It's like playing a board game where the rules are entirely rigged against human nature from the start.
That's a great way to put it.
The boy template in this culture demands that men be these flawless, stoic, spiritual alpha leaders who just never struggle with temptation.
Which is impossible.
Right. And meanwhile, the girl template demands absolute submissive perfection, modesty, and silence. And if anyone steps out of line, they lose their worth entirely.
And this is exactly how systems of patriarchy and purity culture systematically disconnect people from their own bodies.
How do you mean?
Well, the system forces normal, natural adolescent development into hiding. When you are taught from childhood that your own intuition is deceitful and your body is a liability, you learn to ignore your gut.
You just suppress your own desires to fit the template.
Exactly. This creates adults who are profoundly alienated from themselves. And that alienation sets the stage for decades of simmering resentment.
Oh, wow.
Ironically, it creates the exact conditions for secret lives and those hidden corners to thrive. If you cannot be honest about being human in the light, you will hide your humanity in the dark.
Which explains so much about her early adulthood. I mean, when you're taught that your own intuition is dangerous, you seek safety in following the rules perfectly.
You cling to the template.
Yeah. And in that specific bubble, the ultimate rule for a young woman was to get married. So at 19 years old, she marries a 21-year-old student pastor.
They were practically children.
They were kids, living on an annual budget of under $11,000. But they did it because getting married young was the only culturally sanctioned way to experience adulthood, independence, and sex.
They handed over the keys to their young adulthood to fit the template.
They really did. And for a very long time, she played by those rules flawlessly.
She did. She became a highly successful faith leader and a best-selling author within that community.
But the narrative pivot happens when the neat, tidy rules of her bubble violently clash with the suffering she witnesses in the real world.
Yes, the ideological awakening.
Right, and again, just as a reminder, we are impartially reporting the author's lived experience here. But the book details this awakening, focusing heavily on the metaphor of pulling a thread.
Pulling a thread on a sweater until it unravels.
Exactly. Her mind had been rigorously trained to accept simple, rigid rules, black and white, right and wrong. But as she started traveling and listening to different voices, she began pulling at the threads of systemic injustice.
She started looking closely at the complexities of poverty.
Yeah, and then she learned about the severe racial bias in the criminal justice system. The statistics were sitting right there on her desk, irrefutable.
But her community demanded that she adhere to the simple, accepted narrative that the system was fundamentally just.
So she hits a wall where her intellect and her empathy can no longer coexist with the institution's demands.
The text illustrates this profound internal crisis. Her heart just couldn't ignore the pain of marginalized groups, even when the religious structure that gave her a career told her to look away.
This tension builds and finally snaps in October 2016. Exactly 12 days before the 2016 election, she gives an interview where she publicly affirms gay marriage and advocates for the LGBTQ+ community.
And the immediate fallout wasn't just a polite disagreement.
Oh no, it was a brutal, systematic excommunication.
Her publisher disavows her books are pulled from print everywhere.
People in her own community literally burn her books in her front yard.
That is just so extreme.
She loses her career, her income, and her social safety net overnight. So, what does this all mean for the listener? How do we handle that intense cognitive dissonance?
What do you mean by that?
Well, when the people we respect tell us a rule is right, but our own eyes and heart tell us the outcome is devastating and rotten, how do you handle that?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows the ultimate crisis of conscience. Institutions, by their very nature, prioritize self-preservation and conformity over individual conscience.
Always.
When she challenged the narrative, the institution punished her severely to maintain the boundary lines of the group.
But the crucial insight here is the mechanism of reclaiming her agency, right?
Exactly. Choosing her internal moral compass over her insider status was the first major step in dismantling her false life, even before her marriage ended.
She chose her integrity over her career.
She bravely faced the whole truth in her public life, endured the absolute worst-case scenario of rejection, and she survived it.
But the tragedy, and honestly the intense vulnerability of this memoir, is that while she was so brave in her public life, she was still hiding from the truth in her private life.
Right. She was still maintaining the hidden corners at home.
Yeah. The divorce forces her to finally turn that same critical lens inward and examine her own role in her failing marriage. And this is where the text gets incredibly confronting.
It does. Post-divorce, she is in absolute agony, feeling entirely victimized. And her close friend, the researcher Brené Brown, urges her to read a classic psychology book.
Codependent No More by Melody Beattie.
Yes. And the author's initial reaction is to completely reject the suggestion.
She's offended. She thinks, I'm a strong, independent woman. I run a massive career. I'm the innocent victim of my husband's betrayal and his secret life. I am not some weak, codependent pushover.
Which is the common misconception about codependency, right? That it only applies to people who are meek or weak-willed.
Exactly. But then she actually reads the symptom checklist in the book, and her defenses completely crumble.
The checklist just destroys her narrative.
Yeah. Ignoring problems, pretending circumstances aren't as bad as they are, staying constantly busy so you don't have to think.
She realizes she had spent years quietly making excuses for her husband's explosive anger just to protect his public image as a pastor.
She was constantly trying to manage everyone else's experience of him, buffering the kids, smoothing things over, and when that exhausting management didn't work, she used emotional distance to punish him.
Yes, the classic withdrawal.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Wait a minute. She was the one cheated on and abandoned. Isn't it a bit harsh to label her as codependent when she was just trying to hold her family together while he self-destructed?
I completely validate that pushback. And the author wrestles with exactly that feeling of indignation. It feels terribly unfair.
It sounds like victim blaming at first glance.
It really does. But the harsh reality presented in the text is that codependency isn't just about being meek. It's fundamentally an illusion of control.
An illusion of control.
Yes. Trying to save someone who's determined to drown themselves doesn't actually save them. It only prolongs the trauma and breeds deep resentment.
Wow.
She was basically acting as the PR manager for a burning building.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
By constantly buffering the consequences of his actions. She thought she was protecting the family, but she was actually enabling a toxic environment. True accountability means letting go of the illusion that you can manage someone else's choices.
Which means letting go of trying to control others, and then you are left with the terrifying task of taking care of yourself.
Exactly. You can't outrun your own pain anymore.
And for the author, that leads to a massive physical and emotional breaking point.
Because the intellect can lie, but the body always keeps the score.
Yes. 10 months after the divorce, her body just abruptly stops working. She's sitting in a medical clinic, and her blood pressure has spiked to a stroke level 175/125.
That is dangerously high.
And she suffers a massive panic attack in her car, completely unable to function. But then there's this beautiful, pivotal interaction with the physician, Dr. Ahmadi.
I love this part.
He looks at this highly capable, fiercely independent woman who is completely falling apart, and he doesn't prescribe a way to fix her productivity.
He validates her exhaustion.
He says with such profound kindness, your body has carried you on pure adrenaline for an entire year. It fought the bear and it got you this far. But now it just needs to rest.
This raises an important question, though. How often do we let our intellect bully our physical instincts?
All the time.
Dr. Ahmadi's intervention marks the beginning of her somatic healing, listening to her body instead of overriding it.
And her therapist tells her to stop resisting the fear, which is so counterintuitive. It's like being caught in a rip current in the ocean.
Right. If you fight it, you drown.
Exactly. If you fight it and try to swim straight back, you'll just drown from exhaustion. But if you relax, float, and let it carry you for a minute, you conserve energy. Eventually, you can swim parallel to the shore and you survive.
The resistance to the fear was causing significantly more damage than the fear itself.
Yeah. And as she finally stops fighting, we see her start taking highly tangible physical steps to reclaim her agency. She meets with Steve, the financial planner, to learn about her own money.
She finally looks at the spreadsheets.
Yes. And then she buys her dream car. And it's not a practical suburban mom SUV. She buys a manual matte black 1975 Ford Bronco.
I absolutely love that detail.
It takes actual muscle to shift the gears. It represents her reclaimed moxie. But the ultimate physical manifestation of her healing has to be the front porch.
Oh, definitely.
Ugh.
The porch is the perfect metaphor here.
So months before her husband moved out, he had literally taken a crowbar and demolished their entire historic front porch for a renovation he never finished.
He just left a gaping hole at the front door.
A glaring physical manifestation of their broken home. Eventually, she decides she can't look at the ruin anymore.
So she takes matters into her own hands.
She calls her girlfriends, and together, armed with buzzsaws and lumber, they rebuild the entire porch from the studs up in the punishing 105-degree Texas heat.
The sensory reality of that rebuilding is so important. By feeling the heat, using the tools, and physically changing the space, she is proving to her nervous system that she is safe.
Yeah, she doesn't have to wait for someone else to fix it.
Right. She is shifting her living environment from the ghosts of hours and before to the absolute safety of mine and now. It proves that healing is deeply tied to reclaiming our physical reality.
It is incredibly powerful. So as we wrap up this deep dive today, let's just look back at the immense territory we've covered.
We really went on a journey today.
We started with a catastrophic 2:30 a.m. text message that shattered a 26-year marriage in an instant. We walked through the difficult unraveling of those deeply ingrained religious and cultural templates.
Understanding how purity culture and patriarchy force us to hide our humanity.
Exactly. We navigated the brutal fallout of choosing personal truth over institutional belonging, and we examined the painful mirror of codependency.
Which ultimately led to the messy but beautiful reality of becoming your own best friend.
It did. And for you listening, whether you are dealing with a painful breakup, a massive shift in your worldview, or just the exhausting weight of keeping up appearances, this text offers a really powerful reminder.
You can survive the truth.
You can survive the whole truth, even when it burns down your current life. You don't have to be the ruined stick from the youth group object lesson. You can be the one who rebuilds the porch.
Which leaves us with one final, lingering question to ponder on your own as you step back into your day.
What's the question?
If you were to completely strip away every role, template, and expectation that your family, culture, or community has placed on you, what exactly would be left of the real you? And are you brave enough to find out?
Man, what an incredible question to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
Take care, everyone.